Okay, this is episode 3 of Talkin Coyotes. I've got Joseph Wirth with me today. Joseph lives in southeastern Illinois with his wife and his 2 kids, and he has a predator hunting business that's called Close Encounter Predator Hunts. And Joseph, tell us how people can access you in order to line up a hunt.
Yeah, easiest way is going to be through Facebook. The business page is Close Encounter Guided Predator Hunts. Joseph Wirth on Facebook, either of those is fine. And then the website's closeencounterguidedpredatorhunts.com. I know it's a long website name. It's a lot to type in, but
well, it's pretty easy to remember, I think.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, Joseph, how long have you been doing the guided hunts, and then how long have you been doing the guided hunts at night?
4 years. 4 years. The last 2.5, 3 years, I've been doing it pretty much full time. About 3 years. The night hunts I've done since the beginning, since I started. I do a lot more night hunts than I do day hunts. Just because the season's longer and it's a lot easier to crank out stands through, doing night hunts than it is during the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I found it to be that they're more active at night.
Yeah,
right?
You're just day and night, like we said previously. It's like hunting 2 different animals. You're going to get them to do things at night that you'll never get them to do in the daytime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what Joseph was talking about is, we talked about this earlier about how in the West everything's so wide open. Talk about that, Joseph, about the difference in terrain.
Yeah, so like one thing, because I've hunted a little bit out west. Like we said, South Dakota, where you can see for miles, and you'll watch a coyote come from a mile plus across the wide open pasture like it's no big deal. But here in the East, we have a lot more tree lines and drainage ditches and plots of timber, and there are exceptions to it, but it's going to be really rare to get a coyote to come from that far. And here they seem a lot more timid, a lot less, likely to come out into the open. That's why we do a lot of our hunts in the cover, in the timber. Like I said earlier, they will consistently do the same thing based on their terrain and what they're comfortable with. Here in the East, they tend to be a little more reclusive. They have the cover to stay in. And out west, you get more of that pasture ground where they're used to being out in the open. It doesn't bother them to cover that ground like it does here in the East.
Okay. Well, now, which apps do you use as far as, I know you've got lots of property that you've got access to, and you have to have that doing what you do as a guide. What is there any particular app you use to locate, to keep track of your properties?
Yeah, I use Onyx. I've tried a couple of the others. I think there's one called Base Map, and then I think HuntWise has a little bit of a plat map feature. But Onyx is the one that I've always used. They have a lot of layers that you can use, and you can drop different pins, different colors, different things to keep track of. That's the one I like the best. Okay,
I'm gonna have to. There's enough guys I've talked to that, and I don't use it, and I use HuntStand. I'm gonna have to look at that Onyx. Mm-hmm. Now, Joseph, talk about locating coyotes, because coyotes. I did it again.
That's right.
We were talking about this earlier. In different parts of the country, people say it differently. But talk about locating coyotes and how important it is in what you do with your business, and how do you do it? What's your thought process when you're going about locating coyotes, and then how do you actually do it?
Okay, so I think a lot of people misunderstand what some of us mean when we talk about locating. It's not just a matter of howling, they howl back, oh, there are coyotes over there. I was originally introduced to that concept by Tory Cook, hunting with him in Arkansas. And and I'll kind of blend in how I scout, like how I plan for the year, because they kind of go together. every June, I pretend I have zero knowledge as to where coyotes are at. July 1st, I'll start locating. I'll drive around, I'll pick an area, I'll drive around, I'll stop, I'll howl. And the way I do it is I'll do a lone howl, wait a minute, do a pair howl, wait a minute, do a group howl, wait a minute. If nothing answers, I just move on.
Are you typically using the e-collar to do that, or using a
Yeah.
diaphragm?
Yeah, I use the e-collar for that mostly. There are times though that if I'm having trouble getting them to answer, I'll run the diaphragm just for a different pitch and tone. But what I'm doing is starting July 1st, I'm trying to find every litter of pups that was born that I have access to. So once I get that information, and during the summer when I guide, we go back and we hunt those groups. Earlier in July, your adults are hyper territorial. Because of those pups, that family group has a really small home range. Unless there's some kind of intrusion or factor that pushes those coyotes out, they're going to maintain that home range for the most part. And what I'm doing is the night before I go to hunt, and the locating for me is more specific to day hunt. I'm wanting to find where that family group is. I can say, okay, right here. So I can look on Onyx and I can look at the topographical features. Okay, there's a cornfield that connects to a tree row with a creek in it, and there's a bean field that's 6 inches tall on the other side. Well, my best bet's to pull them into that shorter bean field. So I'm looking at that, where they're at, the terrain features. I know what the wind direction is going to be roughly before I get in there. And I use that information to where I can come in from downwind, get extremely close to them before I start calling. And that gives me that advantage of that territorial response of hey, there's a coyote, a new coyote in their house, and I'm trying to elicit that aggressive response. And that's why you see so many, and no different than what Tori's doing, because I essentially learned from him. I just had to put my own spin on it for my terrain. So like having that information before I even turn the call on is how we're able to get them so close.
And you're using just howls to do that?
To locate? Yeah. I'm just and if I throw out one series of howls, 4 or 5 howls, and they answer, I don't howl again. Yeah, I'll listen to them. I'll kind of look over the horizon because it's a night. Try to figure out the tree line, and I'll look at like I said, I'll look at the app to figure out roughly where they're at. And sometimes you get it wrong. And then there are also times where they move a little bit, and it's those are factors outside of your control. But knowing where they are 6 hours before you go to hunt them is a huge advantage if they're still in the same spot. And in the summertime, like I said, July, August, September, they're almost always in that exact same area.
Okay, because of the pups being with mom and dad.
Yeah, they have a really tight core area, and expanding on that, once you get out of September, you get into October, the crops are being cut, you're making that transition into fall. Those pups are getting out a little bit on their own. They're moving. Our night season starts November 10th. So the only main factors, and even getting into October, November, you almost have to have some kind of a natural phenomenon like flooding or a human intrusion, fields being cut, deer hunters walking in and out come October. Those are, if there's not a major factor, I find a lot of times those groups are still in the exact same area come November as they stayed in all summer. In fact, I've got one example I give is I've got this one group of pups that was born in a drainage ditch 150 yards off a road. I have the east side of the road. This group is on the west side of the road. And they are to this day still, I just checked them last week. They are still in that same ditch. I can't get them to cross the road to where we can shoot at them.
So you've got two groups that are across the road, and that road is their territorial dividing line, or
for whatever reason that group will not cross a road. But what I'm saying is that they're so established to that little core area that they're still in the same ditch that they were born in and stayed in all summer. They'll come out. If I howl at them, they'll step out back, meander around a little bit, and just go back in the ditch because they're comfortable and safe. And I have yet to get one of them to cross the road, but they're on my list.
I think I've seen that one particular video that I remember that you shared on Facebook, I believe, or YouTube, one of the two, was of that, where you realized you were just messing with these coyotes that you've obviously know that they're there, and you just would kind of bring them out a little bit, and maybe that was that group. I don't know.
No, that would have been a different group, because the group in the ditch I was talking about, they're on the side of the road I don't have permission on.
Oh, okay.
Or else we just go kill them.
Okay.
I have the other side of the road that I can hunt. They just won't cross the road. So.
Okay, you just haven't been able to lure them out yet. Yeah. Well, they may never come out across that road.
They haven't so far this year, and I've been messing with them since I think I found that group in August, and I've been messing with them since, and they stay real tight to that core area.
Now, have you been back over there on a night hunt and tried to get them?
Oh yeah.
And they
that's
still won't cross.
Yeah, and I've even taken clients over there, and I'm like, we're gonna try this stand. I was like, and I've tried setting up further down, further away. I've tried everything. They'll come out, respond, and just sit there 100 yards from us. We can't shoot across roads in Illinois. So
yeah,
and I don't have that side, but we just kind of have to watch them.
Yeah,
it's always hard to leave when you've got 4 coyotes sitting there at 100 yards. So,
oh yeah.
And I'm sure there are going to be some guys watching this video that know what stand I'm talking about too. So
yeah, well, Dajin Godwin down here in Alabama. You've heard of him, have you?
Yeah,
Dajin?
yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I think I've seen him on Facebook.
Yeah, he's down in Dothan, and I was hunting with him one time down there a couple of years ago in Dothan, and we had a group. It was like 6 across the paved road in another pasture, and we could call them up there to the edge of the road where the barbed wire fence was on that side of the road. They would not come across.
Yeah, roads save a lot of coyotes here. So it's probably the number one factor when we call coyotes up and they don't get shot at. That's probably the biggest factor. Is there, I've posted a bunch of videos of coyotes, literally standing 20, 30 yards from us across the road that we just can't shoot. And it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Well, full disclosure, Dajin saved me that night, because I said, I'm ready to poke these across. Because it was like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m, and there was like no traffic on this country road. And Dajin was like, nah, I don't think we should.
I get clients who are like, we really can't shoot these. And I'm like, not with my gear, you're not.
Yeah, well, because you as a guide with the reputation, you can't mess with that.
No, I can't. And at the end of the day, we're not curing cancer. It's a 30-pound dog. Whether you shoot that thing across, it makes no difference. You know? It's a cool experience to watch them sometimes and not pull the trigger. So I just chalk it as that.
Have you, speaking of that, recently I've shared a video about a couple of domestic dogs that I filmed out on a night hunt where they were trailing does. And what I noticed about these dogs and some other dogs I filmed, domestic dogs, is not just their tails. Their tails are different at night. Their tails are different in thermal, and their gait's a little bit different to me between domestic dogs and coyotes. Have you experienced domestic dogs out on a night hunt?
A few times, yeah. I can think of a few, probably 3 or 4 times that stand out. And it's from the perspective we all look at it from, we want to support what we do as much as we possibly can. But it's just it's an undeniable fact that, and that's the difference between night vision and thermal. Night vision, you're going to have better identification. Thermal, you're seeing the heat projection of an animal. And these guys that are new and just jumping into coyote hunting and going straight to thermal, it can be really hard to differentiate. We, as much as it's kind of taboo to talk about, we all hear the stories. Unfortunately, it's rare to hear about them. Somebody mistook a domestic dog or a deer. and it's no different than guys that hunt with lights and pick up eyes and shoot at a set of eyes, and that's when I hunted with lights, I would scan with red and shoot with green because I could identify better with green.
Okay.
And so yeah, we've had a few, I can think of one time I was guiding, they were a married couple, I think from New York. And we heard a coyote howl and we watched it probably 500 or 600 yards away go behind a farmhouse. Mm-hmm. Well, in the same time frame that it went behind the farmhouse, it started walking down the road to us. Like it came around the house and started walking to us. And luckily it was on the road. And as it got closer, I told the clients, I said, when it gets off the road on our side and it's legal, and it's in the middle of the road and it's 75, 100 yards from us and it barks at us. And I'm like, oh my God, like my stomach just sank. The horrible feeling. And it was, I went the next day and drove by and it was a young German Shepherd. And it's like that, and I've seen coyotes hold their tails in all positions. That tail thing up and down, I've seen them wag their tail as they've come in. So it's like, that's not a finite way to identify a coyote.
You're right. And that's why I was saying, the tail is one possible indicator.
Possible, yeah.
The gait's another possible indicator. These particular two, the landowner got a trail cam picture of one of the two dogs. I told him, I said, look on your trail cam between 10:30 and 11 at night because I want to know what that was. And it looked like a German Shepherd, which a German Shepherd can look extremely close to a coyote.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In thermal.
Okay. Especially. Yeah. So I've noticed that on dogs, and we talked about this earlier, there's no absolutes in anything we do. Right. There's no, but some dogs I've watched have come, they'll track closer together. The ones I've seen, I can only give about my experience. The coyotes that I've seen coming down to me, a lot of times they'll fan out, Sure. Have you noticed how they'll fan out at night like that? And
dogs, and I can only think of a few times where we've seen domestic dogs come to a call. And typically it's only ever been one. I don't know that I've ever seen a group of domestic dogs come to a call. I take that back one time, but they were barking. I could tell what they were. Coyotes, like, I've seen them spread out perpendicular, 4, 5, 6 wide and come in, but I've also seen coyotes come in, have other coyotes behind them cut their scent trail and follow that exact line behind them, single file. Even a couple minutes apart. So, and it's one of those things where identifying what we're shooting at is extraordinarily important to maintain what we have.
I totally agree. And you made a good point. You mentioned it earlier. We have a lot of new guys getting into thermal now and night hunting, especially in my state, Alabama. We just, it's really gotten more popular in the last 6 months. So you make a really good point about proper identification. And I've passed on a few coyotes before because I wasn't sure it was a coyote.
Yeah. We've passed on. We've passed on coyotes that I was 95% sure were coyotes. It's just at the end of the day, it's not worth it because most of us who are predator hunting are doing it in rural areas. Small towns, everybody knows everybody. Everybody talks about the same things because there's not a lot going on. If John down the road shoots somebody, if John down the road shoots somebody's domestic dog, everybody's talking about it for a week.
Yeah, you're right.
And it can be detrimental. There are states around me, Missouri, Kentucky, south of me, Arkansas, where they're just now starting to add night seasons. Tennessee's going through it now where they're trying to get it legalized. And one of the big things, the people who are against it are saying safety. For us states that have the right to do it, maintaining a good track record is going to be beneficial for these other states that are trying to add it.
So. I totally agree with that. And, in Alabama, just this last year legalized it for, a license purchase
Right.
for night hunting, but they still restrict it to February. You can night hunt February the 11th until the next November the 1st. So they won't let us hunt during deer season, and there's a few weeks, a couple weeks before deer season starts that they won't let you night hunt.
Yeah.
And that's, the coyotes and feral hogs. And just, that's the example they use is the safety issue.
Yeah. And does Alabama have a longer rifle deer season?
Yes, it's, I want to say, and I quit deer hunting a long time ago, so I don't know the exact date, but it's close to Thanksgiving, just before Thanksgiving that it starts. And then it runs through February the 11th or 10th. So they lengthened the deer season a few years ago. So, when I got in a debate recently with the wildlife department about it, and I said, you guys are shutting this down for 3 1/3 months at night.
Months. Yeah.
3 1/3 months.
Yeah.
Because he tried to say, oh, it's only 2 months. I'm like, no, it's like, I counted the days. I said, it's 3 1/3 months. So yeah, we're trying to go that way. You mentioned Tennessee above us to the north. We're the only states around us that don't allow night hunting 365 days a year.
Right.
Because, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, they all do.
And that said, like, as much as I am like pro freedom and pro people being able to do whatever they want, I'm glad Illinois only has, a 3 or 4 month night season, because I'm the only one really foolish enough to go and hunt them in the summer months. So I get to hunt coyotes that haven't heard a call for a few months. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. Because down here in Alabama, it's hard to hunt them in the summertime during the day because it's just so flipping hot and humid. So you only get that last, half hour of daylight or that first hour of daylight in the morning. I mean, Jimmy White's extremely successful at it, and like Jimmy and Greg Gallagher and those guys.
Yeah, those Tennessee boys are killers. They put a hurt on them, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is for sure. Hey, I want to talk about something else that that I found really interesting, and I totally agree with you on, and I find myself sometimes having a hard time doing this, is when you get your clients out on a hunt and you teach them to, or you instruct them to, all right, take that first shot at the first still, coyote you get, and then don't do a mag dump. So talk about what the strategy is there.
Yeah. So, okay. So guiding is going to be a different thing from pleasure hunting, and pleasure hunting is going to be a different thing from contest hunting, right? Guiding, the reason, so even if I'm just pleasure hunting, I generally never shoot at running coyotes. Running, especially moving. I think I've killed one coyote the last year that was moving, and it was at like 50 yards slow trot right in front of me, and it was about to hit my wind. Was the only reason I even shot it. But part of that is, we all see these glory running shots at 400 yards. That 6-7 shots in, they roll this coyote. It's real dramatic. It looks great, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody posts the videos throughout the night where they missed 7 or 8 runners and spent $150 in ammunition shooting at running coyotes. That's fine. If people, it makes no difference to me if people shoot at runners. But everything that I do hunting wise is based off of statistics. Statistically, running shots are low percentage shots. And I used to be guilty of it when I first started. And the problem is, emotionally, we see the opportunity slipping away.
Yeah.
We spend all this time and effort and money and thinking and planning and all this stuff, and that coyote is running away, and it's going to be gone in 4 seconds.
You're never going to see him again ever.
No, because now he knows the deal. So, people see that opportunity slip away, and they just spray and pray and hope and some people are really good at running shots, especially guys down south who shoot hogs all the time. That's a great way to get really good at running shots. Mm-hmm. But for me, I kind of hit a point a few years ago where I was willing to watch a coyote walk away in exchange for learning something from it. So
Mhm.
I would call in a group, shoot the first one, flip my safety on, and just watch. And I would watch coyotes, run 100 yards and stop. Or if they were, and you can always tell when you fire that first shot, is the coyote stretched out when he's running? Is his head down low? Or is he loping with his head up looking around?
Yes.
Reading that body, that's what's great about thermal, target acquisition. The picture-in-picture feature on thermal scopes is a great asset if you learn how to use it as a tool. Because you can watch the whole thing unfold, but still shoot zoomed in with that picture-in-picture. But reading that, not panicking, and reading their body language. Okay, is that coyote going to stop? Yeah, it might stop at 300 yards. I'd rather take a standing 300-yard shot than a running 150-yard shot any day. Statistically, I think it's a higher percentage shot.
Mhm.
And part of it too, some of us have had the luxury of luckily I live in a small town and I know most of the sheriff's department and everybody here. But
Yeah.
you go mag dumping, it's a good way to get the sheriff's department called, and it slows your night down and all that stuff. Plus, I'm guiding. I'm responsible for what my clients do.
Yeah.
When it comes to liability and staying in the good graces of landowners that allow me to do what I do.
Mhm.
So I know where the houses are. I know where we can and can't shoot. Guys that are, and it's very easy to get tunnel vision in those scopes.
Yes.
Especially for people that have never done it before. So
Mhm.
guys that have never looked through it, it's like playing a video game. And next thing you know, you fire that initial shot where the whole group runs that way. Well, you got two guys that are now turning like this,
Yeah.
firing shots because they have no awareness of what's going on around them.
Yeah. You're right.
But not shooting at runners for me, I have found that either I can, and I'm actively doing things to get those coyotes to stop.
Mhm.
Two of the things that I do is as soon as that first shot is fired, and I tell my clients, you don't shoot unless I give you the green light. But once I've given the green light, you have it if there is a stationary coyote, unless they're told otherwise. So if I say, go ahead and, 5 come in and I say, go ahead and kill them, pop, pop, they shoot. If a coyote stops, unless they've been told otherwise, they've still got the green light. So as soon as that first shot cracks off, I immediately start howling on my diaphragm. Very first thing.
Okay.
And one thing that I do is as the coyotes come in, what call do you run?
Mostly I use the Fox Pro MFK X24.
Okay, so the TX1000 remote.
Yes.
If I'm playing Pound Town, for example, and coyotes are coming in, I'll hit mute, right? So I'll cut the sound off and let them continue to come in.
Yeah.
Well, now I've scrolled up to a howl. Once they fire that first shot, I just hit play on the howl and unmute it, and that call starts to howl. Well, that change in sound a lot of times is enough to get them to raise their head and look around. Now you've changed their body language.
Right.
They've gone from being head down, hauling butt, to head up, looking around, trying to figure out what's going on. And that little change in body language a lot of times is enough to get them to stop.
Yes.
And then even outside of that, clients here are generally always shocked at how many we can call back after the shots.
Mhm.
Because if you take that first shot and then just dump 5 or 6 rounds at them when they're running, you're not going to call this back.
Exactly.
But if you take one shot and they make it into the brush or make it over the hill, but their body language didn't look like they were super freaked out, well, a lot of times you can still call them back in. We do it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I did that recently where I had 3 coming in, and they came up in this sage grass. It was really a tighter shot than I would normally. I wouldn't normally set up in the place I set up, and the 2 of them came in. I shot those 2, just boom, boom, and the third one disappeared. I didn't know where it went. Well, I started playing either table scraps or Pound Town. I waited a couple minutes, and then I started playing that, and I forgot which one of the 2 sounds got that third one to come back.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's real important. I think you made a really good point there, and I myself am guilty of shooting at the second coyote or the third coyote 3 or 4 times. I mean, I purposely only have a 10 round magazine on my gun because I don't typically shoot more than 5 or 6 times on a stand at the most. Usually it's just 1 or 2.
Right. Yeah. It sometimes we let our emotions get the best of us, because like I said, we put a lot into it. And it's a lot easier to justify that $6,000 thermal scope if you have a pile of coyotes at the end of the night,
That's
so
right. Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's why we go, because it's fun.
Yeah. And you made a good point about if you watch the body language of that, say you drop the first coyote, if you watch the body language on those other ones as they're retreating, sometimes they're hauling butt, but sometimes, like you said, they're just kind of loping and they're like going, what was that? What happened? And they just kind of bounce around. Those will usually stop.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Almost always. And like I said, sometimes they don't stop until they're 300 or 400 yards out. But like if you have a flat shooting rifle, 300 or 400 yards is not a real hard shot. Like my gun.
Speak for yourself. That's a hard shot for me.
Ballistically, it's not.
Yeah. For me, it's hard. I get out past 250. I'm iffy.
Really? Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. And that, like, I get guiding. There was one winter from November to March, I watched 117 coyotes get missed.
Yeah.
But, that was the only year I really kept track. I stopped keeping track after that.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be frustrating a little bit, and that's something I guess you just have to let it roll off your back as a guide, because I've done a 3-day and night guide hunt with Tony Tebby out in New Mexico. And fortunately, I mean, I dropped about 14 and in that 3 night period, and he did tell me I was a pretty good shot. But I mean, there's the horror stories of somebody else missing a bunch.
Oh yeah. I've watched a lot of coyotes get missed, but it is what it is, because and there's a lot to be said for if they're shooting my setup, they're shooting a rifle they've never shot. Some have never shot ARs. Some have never shot a 2-stage trigger. Some have never looked through thermal. So when I switched from night vision to thermal, I missed my first 6 shots.
Yeah.
I had a real hard transition into that thermal, but once you get it, cool. But, because it can be tough.
Because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Joseph. I mean, when you're doing thermal, you're actually watching a video of something that just happened a microsecond before, right?
Yeah, they're the newer thermals. Now they're pretty spot on. But yeah, I mean, you're looking at the projected image of a heat signature. It's not like looking through a glass optic where you're actually physically seeing the animal. It's different. And a lot of times it looks so good that you like, it almost looks like it'd be hard to miss. We watch these videos, we're like, how do these guys miss? Well, it's not as easy as it looks when you first get into it. That's
true. Now, which is there a particular brand of thermal that you're using right now? Yeah,
man, I've had Trigicons, I've used ATNs, but always very briefly. I have a hard time getting away from pulsars. The ones I've never had trouble with. I've never had to send one in. They've turned on every time I push the on button. They stay zeroed for me. I want to say Pulsar had a little bit of trouble when the trails first came out. They had some units that were having, but man, maybe I'm just lucky, but I've always had good luck with Pulsars, and that picture-in-pixture feature is something I cannot live without.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm currently running a Pulsar Trail 2, the XP50, and I've really liked it. I mean, it's performed well for me, so I've got no big complaints about it. I've also looked through. I've looked through the IRA, the IRA Rico 640, and that's a good, clear image.
Yeah. It's a buyer's market when it comes to thermal now. Thermal's become really affordable. You have a lot of options. You can go from minimalist features to every feature you could ever possibly want and then some. So, I mean, it's really about, it's about what you want. And for me, functionality and just I have hunts scheduled. I mean, like I said, between 4 and 6 days a week for several months, and I
Yeah.
need optics to turn on every time. And
Yeah.
I can't be worried about whether my optics are going to work or not.
Yeah. Are you scanning with the Helion too?
Yeah, Helion XP50. If I had it to do over again, I'd probably get the XP38 just for a different field of view, a little wider
Okay.
field of view.
Okay.
But yeah, the Helion, as far as scanners go, those Helions are really hard to beat.
Yeah, I agree. I've got the Helion 2 Pro, and the Helion 2 Pro to me sucks down a little bit more battery juice than the Helion 2.
You know what though? Those batteries, the Helion and the Trail batteries, as far as thermal batteries, you're going to have a hard time beating those.
I agree with that too. I mean, I've been completely satisfied with that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me switch gears on you for a second. On your callings, I'm talking about at night. Let's just say night hunting. On your calling sequences, you starting out with howls, and then you progress to what? Or what are you starting with?
Yeah, so I mean, it's throughout the year as a whole, I'm like 95% vocals. If somebody told me that to continue coyote hunting, I could only use prey distress, I would quit. Like I love the interaction. It's like, man, it's like turkey or elk or whatever, anything interactive. I love having that conversation and manipulating their emotions to make them work a call. Running prey distress for 30 minutes and it's boring. Like it's boring. Yeah. I want them to howl. I want to know where they're coming from. And that the advantage of getting them to respond vocally and knowing how far away they are is a huge advantage. But typically if I pull up to a spot and I'm confident there are coyotes really close, I'll start with a couple minutes of prey distress. And I don't, I'm not a rabbit has killed 1 billion coyotes. But I don't run it much because everybody and their brother around here will go and run rabbit for 45 minutes and they catch on. I'll use woodpecker, specifically MFK, Goody, Woody Woodpecker, and Flycatcher. Those are good ones. Baby coon, big coon fight, and then I'll use like a gray fox distress as a kind of prey distress, which we don't even have gray fox here. We've killed coyotes off of it. So if I think there are coyotes extremely close, I'll do that just to kind of cherry pick one. That way I can come back to that property in a couple of weeks and run vocals, and it's like it's never been called. But if on the average stand, I will go in, I will house like just a lone howl, any lone howl, which to any lone howl is any howl that's a series of 5 or 6 long drawn out howls.
And it doesn't have to. It could be male or female, right?
I don't care what the label says, as long as interrogation, invitation, male, female is of no consequence for whatever it says. I'm just looking for any long drawn out howls, 5 or 6 howls, trying to elicit a verbal response. And a lot of times I'll just come into that. So I will lone howl. I'll throw out a different lone howl, and then I'll either do a pair howl or a group howl. And during breeding season, more pair howl. And I don't know that makes a difference whether you throw one or the other. But then I will, if typically running straight vocals, I will then start with a very, very subtle, like Tori refers to them as social interaction sounds. They're coyotes, whimpers, moans, some scuffling, but nothing aggressive.
Like kind of like a high pitched, like whimper type sounds.
Yeah, whimpers, whines, a little bit of growl, but subtle. If you were to think of like an aggressive sound like Pound Town, Pound Town's real aggressive. Den Vicious 2, are you familiar with that?
Which one?
Den Vicious 2.
No, I haven't tried that one.
It's a really aggressive fight sound.
Okay.
So what I do is I start with the more subtle ones, and then I'll work all the way, so I'll run, what's a good example? Submissive Beggar is real subtle. And then I'll run either Broke Pups or Table Scrap. And then I'll run Pound Town, and then like Den Vicious 2. But what I'm doing is I'm always thinking of kind of the long term of a property. If I can howl and run submissive beggar, which is pretty mild, and this is just it's not always that. It's just that's just an example. The type of sound I think is more important than the specific sound.
Right.
But if I can cherry pick a coyote off of a less aggressive sound, well, I can come back in a couple weeks and run the more aggressive fight sounds and get another coyote that's reacting to that type of sound versus the more subtle sound.
Okay.
You know, and it's one of those things. So what I do is I start with the howls, and then I'll go into, you can call them all fight sounds to an extent, but I'll start from subtle to super aggressive. And I'm just trying to figure out which one's going to trip that trigger and make him come in. I'm almost always going for some kind of a territorial response.
Okay.
Always.
And have you noticed, now I've noticed lately because of breeding season that, you know, some of the ones I've called in where there was either two or more,
Mm-hmm.
the one that came to me was the female.
So, okay, so I'm no biologist, right?
Mhm.
I can only kind of refer back to like anecdotal experience. Throughout the year, typically with more aggressive fight sounds, you will have males showing up.
Yeah,
But it's
that's what,
right. Usually the bigger,
Yes.
gnarly males, their teeth are all worn down, scars on their face, right? But then as you get your females going into the heat, I find a lot more aggression out of some of those females
Mhm.
leading the charge. But when we shoot, if I can differentiate as they're coming in between male and female, we always shoot ladies first.
Yeah.
And typically we can keep that male hanging out long enough to get a second shot. A week or 10 days ago, we had multiple examples of that.
Yeah, he didn't want to leave his lady friend.
No, but she'll bail on him in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was talking to Tony Tebby last week. We did an interview last week, and he said the same thing about the females in breeding season. It can just be ornery, you know, just flat out, you know, aggressive, and it must be a hormonal thing.
Yeah, and what's funny is like and I divide my year up a lot of times, unless I've got a real high density in an area and I feel like I can get in and out without screwing the group up, right? It's real important for me not to overpressure stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I can divide the year basically into 4 different times where their social structure changes, you know, and
Okay.
as a matter of fact, the MFK YouTube Tori has a real good series talking about their biology.
Yes.
But the way I view it, you know, you've got that July, August, September where they're real tight home range. October, November, December, they're starting to spread out.
Mhm.
You get into January, February, you've got your more dominant pairs that are pushing other coyotes around, and then you've got those coyotes that are non-breeding. There may be 3, 4, 5, 6 coyotes still in a group right now. Well, they're establishing their new territory. So the funny thing about vocals, you can go out and howl, and they may say, well, we just had our butts kicked. We don't care enough to defend this ground or come see what's going on. And they could run away, or that could be their new territory. They've established it. They're defending it. They're going to come check out what's going on. So like right now, vocals can help or hurt depending on what kind of, you know, whether you have a breeding pair or whether you have a transient group of coyotes that have been pushed out of their area.
Mhm.
So like it's kind of a weird time of year. But you know, knowing that you can exploit those different things based on what you see, especially with thermal. You know, thermal, we have the luxury of seeing what's going on from a distance. So you can read body language. If you get an answer, you can tell, is it 2 or there are 4 coyotes out there? Because that's a big difference on how I approach a stand.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. About if you can see, you know, out there and you're watching them, and you made a good point about studying them and watching them, because we were watching, I don't know, 4 or 5. No, there was like 3, 4, 5 a few weeks ago, and I was doing like a pair howl, and they got their attention, but they were all just sitting out there watching, and
Yeah.
it took me switching over to a pup distress, and I think I actually went to a Tebby sound, Border Wars. I don't know if you've ever heard that one before, but it's pretty aggressive, like coyote fight. And you know, I use different. I mean, I know you use a lot of MFK sounds, probably mostly MFK sounds, and I use MFK sounds. I just use other sounds as well.
There are a lot of good sounds out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of good sounds. I mean, that you can add to a caller if you want to, and if I've gone into a place and I've used a lot of MFK sounds on that one place, I may need to use something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Variety is, I absolutely think coyotes can kind of pick up if you're going and running the same sounds over and over and over. I absolutely think they can pick up on it.
Yeah.
But talking about groups and territory, and I had a really good stand last week. I had a couple guys from New York. I think they're from New York. Anyway, a group, and I could tell it was 3 or 4 coyotes, answer probably half a mile east of us. So I'm like, okay, I know where those are at. So we go around, we start to set up. Well, they've now crossed the road going further east. They're going away from where I originally howled from. So I look and I see 4 of them and they're going away. And I remember specifically my son shot a coyote. There was a group of pups born on that block. The block is 1 mile by 1 mile. There was a group of pups born on that block that year. I remember my son shot one there. And I said, guys, I know what's going on. I was like, that's their block. We need to circle even further to the other side of them and get past them. I said, that way we'll have the wind. And what was funny was we circled around. I did one set of howls and the whole group came right to us. And it was all about understanding that block belongs to that group. And once we get in position on their territory and have the wind, and it's, sometimes it's a lot simpler than we make it out to be.
Yeah, I agree. How much acreage do you have access to, Joseph, in your region of the country there? I mean,
as far as acreage, I couldn't even guess. Like, I don't know.
It's a bunch.
So like, it's all private ground. And the ground that I have, like some of it I can only go on by myself. Some of it I can only take family. Some of it I can do whatever I want on. Luckily for me, I grew up in this community. I have a great relationship with a lot of farmers. But I mean, between Illinois and Indiana, I've got over 1,000 individual fields that I can hunt. As far as measuring acreage, I would never even try to take time to figure out how much it is.
Well, how often? I mean, how often do you hunt the same field? I mean, are you trying to do it about no more than 4 times a year?
If I can get away with it 4 times a year, and now, like I said, if I've got a group there and I went in and I killed one on woodpecker, well, you can bet if I know there's a group there, I'm coming back in a couple of weeks. Then we're going to kill one on vocals. But typically, if I really work a stand hard every time I go to it, I'm looking at 4 times a year, and that's because I'm hunting it every time their social structure changes. Because it's almost like their memory. It's like a goldfish, their memory only lasts so long. When their social structure changes, it's like previous experiences don't matter as much. If you get a coyote that's moved into an area, like if he's been called on a property a mile away, 2 miles away, and been pressured there, if he leaves that and goes to a new property, I find a lot of times that, like those breeding pairs establishing a territory, or those non-breeding groups that are establishing their territory, if they've moved to a new area, it's almost like starting over.
Yeah.
And I'm finding coyotes in places now that I didn't have them in November because they're being pushed around so much. And and we're using that territorial response to our advantage.
Yeah. I find that, and that's interesting to me about how you'll have certain coyotes that'll be, if you want to call them, local,
Sure,
for lack of a better word, versus a nomadic, a wanderer type coyote. I mean,
and there are studies. There are a lot of studies out there that kind of almost try to project the image that coyotes are super all over the place. But like there have been a couple released this year where a coyote was trapped and collared, and then driven 140 miles away and released. Which, like, those are really bad studies to base that off of.
Yeah.
If you pick me up and drop me off 140 miles away, I'm probably going to wander around for a while.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Just trying to figure out where, where you are.
But I think that I don't think coyotes. Okay, so specific to my terrain, my area, we've got rivers and bodies of water they won't cross and all this stuff. But I think if they feel safe in an area, they'll stay there for a really long time. Like, I think they almost have to have something that pushes them out of an area to leave it.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they've got a good food source, they've got access to food and cover, then why leave?
Yeah, because I mean, we've all got those properties where there are coyotes there every year, and then we've got other properties where it's almost like every 2 or 3 years there will be a group. But there are some places that hold coyotes all the time.
Yeah. Hey, let's wind up this particular session, and I could talk to you for hours about listen to you share information, and we'll do another session sometime. But what mistakes do you see beginners commonly make?
Overcalling. They'll go, and the big one is probably going and calling the same 5 or 6 groups of coyotes every weekend. I always say it's like playing fetch with a dog. We've all done it. If you're in the middle of playing fetch, the first time you fake a throw, the dog runs all the way out there and comes back. The second time it goes halfway. The third time it sits there on its butt and looks at you like you're a jerk, right?
Yeah.
These are no different. They become conditioned by what we're doing to them. Overcalling, not paying attention to wind and setup, and shot selection, knowing when to shoot, taking the best shot, not always the first shot.
Yeah,
those are probably the biggest mistakes.
Yeah, and I agree.
Those are the mistakes that I made when I first started.
Yeah, and me as well.
God knows I made plenty of them.
And I typically I look at myself as I'm more of I'm not an aggressive caller. I'll sit out there and they'll throw out some howls and wait a few minutes and then throw out some more howls, and then I'll wait and then wait a few more minutes and then throw out maybe, like you said, some kind of intermediate type sound that's not full blown aggressive. And then, but it may take me, 45 minutes to do that.
Yeah. And I don't have that kind of patience. Okay, now if there's a landowner that needs coyotes killed, like if I've got a cattle farm or something, yeah, I'll have the patience to do that. But if I'm just pleasure hunting, it's like it's no different than turkeys. You can go and hunt the same flock of turkeys 5 days in a row, do the exact same thing for 5 days, and on the 5th day catch them in the right mood. And it's like I'm trying to get that aggressive coyote. I'm calling it a specific type of coyote. I want the one that's aggressive. I want the one that's going to come in barking and screaming, and those are, to me, that's the fun in coyote hunting, is seeing that. You've seen the videos of like decoy dogs freaking out.
Yeah, I love it. Just think about Levi Johnson.
Yeah. So when we're calling and we're running a fight sound of some kind, and those coyotes come in, just screaming at us or just losing their minds. I mean, we've all seen them do things they're not supposed to do. Like we said, we talk about there are no definites in this. But yeah, that's that I like that quick. Like if I'm pleasure hunting, 15 minutes. Guiding, I'll get into 20, 25 minutes. If we're contest hunting, no more than 12 ever. Yeah,
see, I was telling, I'm doing my first contest hunt this coming week. End of this month.
Yeah.
And I'm so used to sitting on a stand for so long that I've really got to change that for this. I've got to basically set a timer on myself and limit it to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And go.
And contest hunting is a totally different thing because it's a practice in efficiency. Every piece of gear has its place. Everybody has their tasks. Everybody's responsible for certain things. There's no ego. You work with your strengths. The other guys work with their strengths, and we acknowledge what they are. and you cover as much ground as possible because you're trying to get that easy coyote, trying to get that easy kill and move on.
Yeah.
It's a numbers game.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that another time about
Sure.
the differences between contests versus, that kind of stuff. But listen, man, I really appreciated the time. I think the attention span of a coyote hunter, watching a video,
About 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's about, it's definitely less than an hour.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah, but tell me one more time what your website is, or how to find you on Facebook to set up a guided hunt.
Yeah, so Facebook's usually the easiest. It's Close Encounter Guided Predator Hunts is the business page, and then same thing for the web address. Then I've got a YouTube channel. They're not episodes so much as they are just videos of the animal. I'm not much of a personality. I just appreciate watching animals work and trying to get really good footage of animals in extreme close range is what I'm going for.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to stop the recording right now, but I want you to hang on. I want you to hang on for a second, okay?
Sure.